When most people look at a mudflat, they just see mud. But my next guest sees a whole ecosystem that's thriving and supports an amazing array of different biodiversity. The guest is Dr. Nicholas Murray from James Cook University, and we're going to talk about his work on mapping the world's global mudflats.
We used remote sensing to generate global maps in a time series to understand change of coastal ecosystems at the global scale. And mudflats in particular are a completely underappreciated ecosystem type in the coastal zone. They're the main coastal ecosystem across much of Asia and parts of Africa as well. And before we started our project, we really had no understanding of where they were or how they were changing over time. Now, using more than 700,000 satellite images in that project and about 100 years of computation time, we were able to show that mudflats have about the same global extent as mangrove ecosystems. So they're very extensive, but quite concerningly, we also showed there's been about a 15 or 16% decline in the extent of mudflats on the global scale since 1984.
So I know you're a bit of a bird watcher, so I think it's the birds that have got you into the mudflats research. So do you want to just talk a bit about the importance for birds? They're important for many things, but birds is one of those.
Yeah, well, I first started out working on coastal change because I was interested in what was causing the declines of migratory shorebirds. There's more than 300 species of migratory shorebirds in the world that depend on coastal ecosystems to make their migration from their southern foraging sites in the austral summer before they move north to breed in the Arctic. And what we're finding worldwide is that these species are declining catastrophically. Now, one of the key hypotheses that was causing those declines was that habitat stopover sites, as they make their migration, were diminishing in area. But it wasn't before we could use remote sensing to understand those habitat changes that we could really understand that it was the main driver of these population declines on an enormous global scale.
Mudflats might not look like much to us. They're like a veritable buffet for these birds, so they're really important ecosystem and many other types of biodiversity. So did you want to talk a bit about what's the impact of having these maps and how is that helping change policy or management? Or what does having a map do?
Well, our global mudflat maps are freely available. The code that we use to make them is also freely available, and it's a time series, so it allows anyone who's interested in coastal change to estimate the diminishing area of these ecosystem types. Now, we've seen the data used so far in a range of different ways. It's been available for about 3 years now, and we've had reports of studies that estimate the performance of protected areas in protecting these very dynamic coastal ecosystems in some of the most populated places in Earth, such as the coast of China. And in addition, there's been some really neat sort of micro-scale uses, such as using the extent of our maps in Borneo to understand just exactly where the outer edge of a national park needs to be in the coastal zone, because it's quite easy to develop a protected area and not capture everything that you want to have in it. So our maps really allow users of the data to understand exactly what's in a certain place on the Earth.
It's really important that these ecosystems are fully captured in the protected areas, otherwise we're not protecting the biodiversity that depends on them. So my final question is for early career researchers who are just getting into maybe doing mapping studies and aren't really sure how they would then approach getting their maps used by managers and having impact. What advice do you have for making those maps?
Well, I think the main thing that I've found is really getting it out there. We make websites. I'm not a web programmer, but I decided that one of the things that was needed when we make these maps and make the data and the code publicly available is really that outreach effort really needs to be quite enormous. And I would add sort of 20% to any project to try to get
20%, yeah.
20%, a lot of effort to get it out there. Yeah. But it's worth it because, my fundamental motivation of doing these complex global analyses is to support conservation and wise use of coastal wetlands. And we're really sort of seeing those databases and websites being used quite broadly.
Yeah, access data is really key for that. Did you have any other final thoughts or acknowledgements you wanted to make?
I think one of the things I need to acknowledge is that without free satellite data, I wouldn't be able to do the sort of work that I do. So I really need to acknowledge the USGS for making Landsat data freely available in 2008. And then without the computational resources to be able to analyse millions of those satellite images at once, we couldn't have an understanding like we do about the distribution of important ecosystems on the planet. And Google part-funded the Mudflats study, and so I'm really appreciative of being able to work with the developers at Google to develop models that can be run on the cloud to access this enormous information source, which is Earth observation time series data.
It really seems like you're using cutting edge technology to make this mapping happen, but it's really important, and hopefully more people will appreciate mudflats because of it. So that was Dr. Nick Murray talking about his work on mapping the world's mudflats. I'm Dr. Chris Brown, and this is the Conservation Hackers vlog. So thanks for listening. Please share us with friends and colleagues. It's the number one way we can reach more people. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube if you'd like to hear more interviews like this. See you later.